Over 3,400 people have been arrested after the unrest in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal. Now, yesterday, over 1,000 alleged looters appeared in courts across the two provinces. How is the Correctional Services dealing with the influx? Joining me now is the department's spokesperson, Singabakho, to talk about this and other important matters. But Nxumalo, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with the influx of awaiting trial prisoners. Where are they usually kept?
A very good morning. Newly admitted or remand detainees are sent to facilities meant to accommodate them, meaning in the 243 centers that we have, some only deal with sentenced inmates, and we have some with sections where they only accommodate your remand detainees. And that's where we'll then keep the ones who are yet to be sentenced, but they have been to court. The majority of those centers are in the metros, but you do find them even in the small towns. But in those centers, you don't have a big influx. So right now, due to the unrest that we've seen in the country, Durban, Westville, and Johannesburg are really feeling the pressure.
Sure, and you talk about that pressure. It's exactly the very same pressure that led you to release those that were seen as perhaps people that would not be much of a threat to society. Perhaps some of them were closer to being released anyway as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. How much pressure does this add on you now? We're talking about over 3,000 people.
We had really done quite a lot in terms of reducing overpopulation in our centers. At some point, we were sitting at about 157,000, and we had reduced numbers to about 135,000. And we are now at about 138,000, so the numbers are starting to increase yet again. But it is those in the metros where, you usually find overcrowding. When you go to the outskirts or to the small towns, there is no overcrowding at all there. Hence, from time to time, we always look for means if perhaps we can transfer inmates from overpopulated centers to where there is no overcrowding. But then others find that you are now taking them far away from their families. But it's a balancing act that from time to time we need to strike. So right now, those in the metros are feeling the pressure in the two provinces.
Very briefly, Nxumalo, remind us again of the criteria for those who qualified for early release, in part motivated by the reduction of the population due to COVID-19.
It was a parole dispensation linked to a COVID-19 pandemic, to say those who would have been considered in the 6 months to come, where then that period shortened, to say instead of having to wait for another 6 months, consider them now, and those who have completed their programs, their profiles can go to the parole boards. But those who are yet to complete their programs, first they must complete them and then be taken through the necessary processes. Perhaps what was critical here was to say there was no short-circuiting in terms of the actual parole consideration process. They needed to go through what is specified in the Act, in our policies. So that was done. Hence, even today, you still find some who are almost at the tail end of completing their programs. Then parole boards, will consider them. Hence, then we had projected about 19,000. That number went down to about now 14,000 who are out. So and then what then transpired is that some of them had other cases. Therefore, we could not then take their profiles to the parole board. Therefore, they need to attend to other matters. So as a department, we had done quite a lot in terms of reducing the inmate population. But then it does concern us when then other people commit crimes, and then they have to come to our centers. Unfortunately, we can't reject admitting them. If people break the law and courts feel that they must be incarcerated, we have to admit them.
Mr. Nxumalo, in the last couple of days, moving on from the COVID-19 and the influx in prisons, you've been responding to a number of media queries about the former president, Jacob Zuma, and the anticipated perhaps I should put it, the anticipated application for compassionate release in order for him to go and bury his brother. Have you received that application?
And that application is yet to be presented to us by the former president. And I think at times when others try to explain it, it's like they make it so difficult, whereas it's a very simple process. And when you look at Section 44(1)(a) of Correctional Services Act, it does explain, the processes there. An inmate has to make that application to say, I'm making this application in order to attend to a particular function, be it a funeral or any other event, and then it must be considered by that particular correctional center. And after that, then they will then provide feedback. But then there's a number of variables that then the center will look into. But critical there is the issue of the term of the sentence and the risk. Which you will where you are guided by the classification of that particular inmate. Then after that, they will then make a decision. But what we need to highlight is that it's like a temporary leave for an inmate to leave a correctional facility. That does not mean that now this person is no longer an inmate. That person is still an inmate, but you're only given that temporary leave. You are going out, you have to be in civilian clothes, and you have to be monitored, or there must be officials, making a point that, they can account, for your whereabouts. And it has to specify the date and the time within which you are ought to leave the center and return back to the facility.
You talk about risks. What risk would apply in the case of the former president in releasing him to go and bury his brother?
The former president is classified as of low risk. You look at even his son, he's a short-term sentence inmate. But then I know others say, but the risk could be high if you take him out. The risk in this case is to say, is this person likely to escape? Or is this person likely to refuse to come back to a facility? And then so you measure it, in that term. So whereas then if once this person is out, well, then what needs to happen? Then it is our duty and other law enforcement agencies to make it a point that one, the inmate is protected out there, and also to make it a point that he's safe at all time, and to a point where the inmate has to come back to to continue serving the sentence.
You say that he is seen as low risk. However, there are those who are going to argue that releasing him may once again spark public interest, particularly for those who sympathize with him, as we saw outside his home. Basically, simply put, would there be a risk that if he is let out, there are those who are going to vow to lay their bodies on the line in order to prevent him from being taken back? Do you anticipate a situation like that?
That is a bit complicated because we're yet to receive the application. It is yet to be considered. And then I think if one were to say, no, this is likely to happen, and, definitely, and want to say, no, we'll make everything possible to ensure that it's safe. What if the facility says, no, you are not granted compassionate leave? And then it would be like we're contradicting ourselves. So it's important that we wait for that process where he has to apply, let it be considered. They will use all the resources available to consider that particular application, study the environment, and see whether it will be appropriate and whether we'll have sufficient resources even to manage if he is to be granted compassionate leave. So at this stage, I wouldn't want to speculate because that application is yet to come before us. And I need to explain, one may say, but why is it taking this long? An inmate can only apply once that particular activity is confirmed. If, let's say, it's a funeral, it has to be confirmed that a funeral is taking place on this particular day and at this time. Then an inmate can make an application. But where you don't have any days confirmed, then an inmate cannot make that application because we need to be guided by, okay, where are you going, what are you going for there, and at what time will you be there, and then work out a security plan if that inmate, is to be granted that leave. But at this stage, we are not yet there. So let us wait until an application is made, let it be considered, then thereafter we'll have to then make a pronouncement in terms of where we are.
Very, very briefly, specified period within which to apply, is there such?
And I said it's a simple and very, I don't say a short process, but once the date of that particular activity is confirmed, an inmate can then make an application. Then it is upon us to then consider that application. Perhaps, but we have to look at everything. You can't short-circuit the process.
Singabakho Nxumalo speaks for the Correctional Services Department. Thank you very much for your time.